Hi, everybody. Thomas Miller on the Fun Astrology video podcast. Thank you for joining us. It is the time for the week that we would all just like for it to be over with, right? Well, we're going to get over with, but I'm not sure how when over with will be. We don't know that. But as at least we approach the week, there is one subtle little aspect that I want to show you that could make a significant difference in the outcome of this election. That big subtle aspect is tomorrow. I'll show you that in just a second. Let's stop off here on Monday. First of all, we have a trine between the sun, which is in Scorpio, 12 degrees, trining Saturn, which is going backwards, retrograde, in Pisces at 12 degrees. This is a water trine, a favorable trine, an emotional trine. But it's Saturn, which represents delays. So I know we're all probably wondering, how long will it take to figure out who won this thing? Will it be that day from one of the two dominating, or could there be delays, Saturnian delays? And I would say if there are delays, what this is indicating is, let's just read cookbook astrology here for a second, because it's really pretty clear, given the context of the day, that could there be delays in getting the result so that they can, Scorpio, go deep into an exploration, research. What do Scorpios do probably better than anything? They dig in and get to the bottom of things. And this has a dig in and get to the bottom of the things so that we can know the truth, the positive side of Pisces, about the outcome. I don't know if that will happen, but just reading cookbook astrology into this, it certainly is possible. Now, let me show you this little subtle aspect with the moon tomorrow morning. I jumped my chart to Eastern time from my local time zone, and at 5:23 tomorrow morning, East Coast time, the moon will be in a square 90-degree aspect with Neptune. The moon is getting ready to leave Sagittarius and enter Capricorn. It does that Tuesday morning at 10:17 a.m. Eastern Time. But before that, it aspects Neptune with a square, which is a challenging, or let's say negative, aspect. Steve Forrest, in the Book of the Moon, which I narrated as an audiobook, describes a technique that he and others use, that when the moon leaves a sign, what kind of aspect and to what planet it aspects can leave some trail dust of what might happen during and right after that aspect. And he uses as an example Apollo 11. That was the man on the moon, one small step, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. And that was launched just before a lunar square to Neptune. And they basically it could have been a catastrophic outcome, because the landing computer malfunctioned while they were trying to get the lunar module on the surface of the moon. Neil Armstrong had to, I think it was like with 25 seconds of fuel left, grab the stick, land not where they intended to land originally, manually, so that they would have enough fuel to lift off and get back up into orbit to reconnect with the spacecraft. Very tense situation. They made it. And I love how Steve Forrest describes it, so much so that this is going to be Tuesday morning's podcast, is the excerpt from the Book of the Moon describing that situation. But it could have been very challenging. And as Steve said, I wouldn't have chosen this day for the launch to launch the mission with that, knowing that that moon was in a challenged aspect. Some of you might remember the presidency of Ronald Reagan, and he had an astrologer, Joan Quigley, who had pretty well control over his schedule and the White House events, particularly after the assassination attempt. And that was for both terms. And Nancy Reagan also consulted astrologers for everything. So, I mean, they believed in it. They used it, and it dominated that presidency. And this was a big technique that Joan Quigley did for Ronald Reagan. She picked out for them the lunar voids of course and whether the last aspect was positive or negative. It's a very powerful technique. I've been using it since I narrated the book. It just imprinted it on my mind. And we'll see. I mean, we'll look back on this later in the week and we'll reflect back on this and see what happened. But I just wanted to point it out because this could be the same kind of glitches, the same kind of challenges. And with Neptune, we are talking about lies and deceptions, the truth. I think everybody is a little bit skeptical about how this could come down and can we trust the process? And already we're hearing stories of anomalies. And that's all in this package of both what we talked about, the Scorpio sun that we just mentioned yesterday, the Scorpio sun in the trine to Saturn, slowing things down. Stop, wait a minute, let's do the digging. Maybe it goes to the Supreme Court. That whole thing again could be an outcome of what happens through the day on Tuesday. Next, we're set up to Thursday, and I jumped the chart again on you. I stayed in Eastern time, but I put this to the 0 degrees Aries, so that's the natural wheel. We're in zodiacal order now around the chart instead of sunrise. And the reason I'm showing you this is just one thing, basically, early in the morning, you won't even see it on here, but Mercury enters the shadow period for its next retrograde. So it will start to slow down and start to get more powerful. Mercury rules communications. Communications could be a big part of what happens after this election. Let me give you some dates from the Honeycomb Almanac. Mercury goes into the shadow on November 7th. It goes retrograde on November 25th. It stations direct, in other words, start moving forward on December 15th. And then it clears the shadow, so it will be back to where it was on the 25th when it goes retrograde, and that will be on January 2nd. So it's a really big, wide swath, almost 2 full months that Mercury is going to be moving slower, awkward, out of balance, starting on Thursday of this week. Now, there's one other phenomenon that we follow called the moon wobble. And basically what the moon wobble is, I'll just show you on here. It's when the sun either is right next to or squares the nodes of the moon. And this next one is going to be a square to the nodes of the moon. And that will happen, that will peak on December 23rd. It's a Monday. I was like, oh my, I didn't write that down in my notes. But we back up either, some people follow it back 2 weeks and some people back up 3 weeks. And the moon wobble is when unusual things happen on planet Earth. One of the most recent examples, well, we had all these fires out here in Southern California under the last one. The one in October of 2023 was right when the Hamas attack occurred that started all the conflict in the Gaza Strip. So this one will be 21 days out on December 2nd. So there's going to be an overlap of December 2nd or the 9th, depending on where you want to drop in on the moon wobble, with Mercury retrograde. And that just adds to more confusion around this. And there's one other thing that happens in December, and that is Mars goes into retrograde itself and is in retrograde up until not too far from the inauguration in January. So, or I think it goes past it. I didn't pull those dates for this, but Mars does go retrograde. Maybe I'll look them up and pop them on the screen. Maybe not. We'll just see. Let's see how much time I have. But Mars goes retrograde, and it is during that time between the election and the inauguration. So there's a lot of space in here, a lot of energy in this space right after the election. So we're setting it up with that. Then we wrap up the week. Really, like I said, there's not a whole lot in the space this week, but we wrap it up with a square between Venus in Sagittarius. That's a good placement. Squaring, though, here's again the truth, Neptune in retrograde in Pisces. So that could contribute to that dynamic if it does indeed exist. So we will see. I wish I could tell you more. I wish it was really cut and dried, but everything from both looking at the candidates' charts, looking at the election day chart, and everything else just shows that this is not cut and dried in astrology. And I hope you have plenty of popcorn for the week ahead. And that's the one thing to prepare for. And we will watch all of this unfold together. I'll be here on every day this week in the podcasts, and I'll be playing that Steve Forrest excerpt on Tuesday from the Book of the Moon about Apollo 11. That's a great clip. So have a great week. Stay firm. Stay steady. Whatever side wins, we're going to be okay, because we're going to use our will like the astronauts did to land just fine. Have a great week, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the podcasts.